Okay, we're going to get started. What's that? We have quorum. Well, no, that's right. No, not for a hearing. No. I'm told that Chairperson Powell is on her way, but I figure it's probably best to get started, and when she does get here, she'll do as she always does, which is take the chair and move through this agenda, which is pretty straightforward. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Today is April the 30th, 2018. Hey, Barbara. First of all, I want to begin by saying to Dr. Nelms, caught me off guard, man. I'm used to seeing this suit and the tie. I mean, people are used to me coming in very casually, but you, what is your fraternity, brother? Is that what that is? Okay, all right. I'm actually kind of stalling for time, but I'm also doing this because I just can't hold this in. And some of you already know because you're Facebook friends of mine. Dr. Nelms is. My daughter got accepted to Hampton, and she's going to Hampton. Actually, she's known that for a while, but she finally decided this weekend that she would go to Hampton. I'm so proud of her, and thanks for all the well wishes. We just really looking forward. And I know that's the experience of a lot of students this time of year, and that's why for years I have worn college garb and encouraged people to talk to their students and their families about going to college. So to all those families out there that are feeling what I'm feeling, as many of you know already, it's an amazing feeling. I've gone through it twice before. My oldest, who was a teacher in the district, I'm still stalling for time, by the way. No, we'll do it. And I suspect this meeting will be Commissioner Elliott, will be very short, I'm sure. My oldest was a teacher in the district. What's that?
Come on, let's go.
We'll get to it. Was a teacher in the district. He went to SUNY Buffalo, and my middle one went to Temple. And both of those two graduated from the district. And I've said it many times, I thank the district. Some of you were not around for them having gone to college. So, all right, I can't stall any longer. I'm sure Commissioner Powell's on her way. This is round 3. I am told that this was sort of the catch-all opportunity for board members. If you had any questions regarding anything that was in the budget, this was your day to do it. And so I'll begin as Commissioner Powell does at the end. GC, we'll start with you. Any questions?
No question, but just a comment. Throughout the 3 deliberation sessions, I've been really pursuing the climate task force recommendations and ensuring that those recommendations were incorporated in the budget with fidelity. And the response here in round 3, a lot of detail around the 4 recommendations that were still need a little bit more detail from the past round. Got everything that I was looking for on that. I think the CTF recommendations align very well with the budget, not only in terms of the FT and the funding, but the descriptions of what activities the district is going to do over the course of the next year. So appreciate that. It's good. It's what I was looking for. Have a few minor follow-up questions I may line to hit you up on, but that was the content that I was looking for to make sure that those recommendations are being implemented with fidelity. So thank you.
Commissioner Elliott?
One of the things that I'm going to be, if I have to get 4 votes, I'm going to do this. I want to see the exact salaries of every person that's listed on the summary pages. So as opposed to it being an average salary, we need to have exact salaries. So I am going to be asking for a motion to put exact salaries in those sections, because I think that this is misleading to the public, because they're not going to read necessarily average salaries. They're just going to be looking at the salary. You know, I'm looking at the EPO, and they're only going to be looking at the average salary of what a lower school principal is supposed to make, but we don't get the exact salaries. I think that when people look at that, we got a $1.2 billion budget, but they see this kind of information, it can be misleading. So I'm going to ask for that. And then secondly, when I'm looking under EPOs, I mean under under E's, I don't see the salary for the superintendent listed here. And I think that needs to be listed under the section of EPO. And so if I have to get a motion, if I have to get 4 votes for that, that's what I want. I want the exact salary, because people need to understand where the money is going.
Dr. Delms or Barbara, Dean Williams, is there some reason logistically why that could not be included in there? I'm just asking this. I mean, we could do a motion, but if there's some reason why that can't be there or it's difficult, please explain that to us.
To have the, we have an appendices at the back of the book that we always get all the salaries for the individuals, but I think what Commissioner Elliott is saying is for each of the pages in the schools that we have the actual salaries listed on the profile page in section 4. The challenge with that is there are times when we may not know who is going to be at a school. So when we budget using average salaries, and you're correct, it may be, for people who don't have full knowledge, it may be misleading, but there are times when we don't know who is going to be in a school because staff moves around, so we could put an actual salary for a person, but that's not where the person will end up being. So right at this time, we are going through staffing with the schools and HCI, and they're making determination as to who is going to be in which school. So if people shift around, that may not be accurate because people move.
Then let me recommend this, that in the beginning of the notes, the introductions, that statement be listed in the first section.
I will.
Because I'm
definitely-
sure whoever the lower school principal is, they're making far more than $113,000. So,
Section 7, page 17.
I'm sorry, Dr. Numbs, I didn't hear you.
Salary is there for the superintendent. Right.
Could you
So for-
repeat that so that that's on the record, because I don't
On,
know.
in section 7, page 17, you see the East EPO has 3 departments, if you will. You have the superintendent's department, which is department code 25905. That we can find on section 7, page 17 for the superintendent's salary, and all the staff member who basically report into the superintendent's office. Then you have the East Lower School, which is department 26104, which is the lower school, which is the middle school, and then you have the high school, which is 26105. So that's how it's broken out. So if you go to page 17 in section 7, you see all the individual position that rolls up to the superintendent's department.
okay, and then looking on that same page, I'm looking at television production. What's done over at East High School that requires somebody at the salary of $100,000?
You need, Dr. Nelms, you want to come to the mic so we can?
So 2 years ago, when there was first of all, we're not paying $100,000 for that, that individual. 2 years ago, there was a proposed budget deficit, and one of the television production individuals were going to be cut. And so I worked with ACI, and at the time, Chip Partner, to fund part of that person's salary to work a day at East and to work 4 days at central office so he can maintain his full-time status. And in those 2 years, if you've been to East, we've revamped the entire auditorium so they could be used for the community. We have additional cameras in there and monitors, and he was in charge of making sure that the right equipment was ordered and training the staff on how to use it. So that salary is not what we paid. We paid a portion of that. I think it was a 0.2 that we paid to prevent someone from being eliminated from Chip Partners' department at the time.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's it for me, Mr. President.
I know Commissioner Funchess, you just stepped in, but today, as I was explaining, and I'll give the mic, I'll turn the gavel back over to Chairperson Powell in a second, but today is sort of a catch-all day. If you had any questions that relate to anything in the budget, today was the day to do that. So I don't know if you had any questions. If not, we'll just move on, keep on moving this way.
Come back to me.
Okay. Commissioner Hallmark?
Sure, I just have one question. I was looking at one of the questions that was submitted by another commissioner, and some terminology was used. I didn't know what it meant. PMAF. Can someone describe what that is, and so I can understand
I thought
the question?
we
Thank you.
were supposed to write no acronyms, but it means it's a position management action form. And what that document is, several years ago, when I came to the district, we used to have a paper document that whenever you need a position either added or subtracted or modified in the budget, that document will be completed. And then we literally had to walk it from people to get it approved. One of the challenges with that was when you left it on a person's desk, it would sit there for a long time. And then many times they would make changes to the original requester's document. So by the time it ended up being processed, the principal or the requester would say, that's not what I requested. So people would change the document as it went through the process. So Sarah Baza and myself and someone from IT, we introduced this process of making it electronic. And what that does, it's an online process where you go in, fill the information out, and it has 5 levels of approval. Once the requester approves it, submits it, it goes to that requester's supervisor, then it goes to budget, then it goes to HCI, then it comes to the CFO, and then after I have approved it, then it goes to the superintendent after we have done all the diligence to make sure that this request is properly aligned. We're not breaking any union rules, we're not breaking any civil service rule. Everything is in what the schools need or which department needs it, and then that's when it goes to the superintendent after everybody has reviewed it and approved it, done the analysis, and then based upon that, my recommendation is to the superintendent, now it's a good request, and then that's when it goes through. There are times when these PMAF gets stopped because there are times when it may be breaking civil service rules, so HCI will look at it and say, you can't do that, or it goes to budget and say, this is not aligned with what we are doing because the dollars aren't there. So it could be stopped at any of those approval, even final approval by the superintendent. As she reviews it, she may say, this is not aligned with our initiatives, and what did all of you do to push this through? Everton, what's going on? And she may stop it at that point in time. And then it goes back to the originator with an explanation as to why.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No more questions.
Vice President Powell?
Oh, I just wanted to remind you, as a matter of protocol, that whenever you use the acronyms, the first time you use it, spell it out. Yes. Then everybody will know.
I think that came from one of the commissioners as an acronym first. Yes. So we should be reminded of that as well.
And again, I apologize if I'm not reading this correctly, but I got a school profile pages, right, which is an update or additional data, right? You can just correct me whenever I'm wrong. This thing, right? Yep. And I noticed, in looking at it, that if you, for example, turn to page 23, that's the Young Men's Academy, the Leadership Academy for Young Men. Again, I'm looking at the school profile pages. No.
It's not one of our.
Yeah.
I assumed it. Yeah, I assumed it belonged in section 4, but maybe not. That's why I said that. Anybody can correct me, because section 4 deals with school profiles and budgets.
Yes.
I don't know. I can't recall whether I got this in the Friday packet or whether it was here on the
You
table.
can still go ahead. We could figure it out.
Okay.
It's just the updated school profiles.
So updated school profiles.
The profiles weren't there initially. And, yeah, they
Okay.
were there initially, but then they added the FTE to it.
All right. So, and again, I apologize for confusing anybody, but if you go to page 23, and the school that it references is the Leadership Academy for Young Men. Let me just see that. It's page 23 on this school profile pages. But again, the school
In
is...
your budget book, it's page 6768.
All right, let's do that. Let's go to page 67, 68. Okay. All right, so interestingly, this particular page 67, 68, it says, mission, upon graduation, 100% of our young men will be college and or career ready. What was interesting is this supplement, so they would call it in the legal profession, gets into some BEDS code data, incidents and suspensions, enrollment.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
It's the profile page with the accountability information.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
So,
Now, so I assume this was supposed to, because it had the 3 holes, and it's supposed to be inserted somewhere in here.
yes.
Yep, okay. So my question, though, related to the performance indicators. And again, I could be wrong. I've been a bit distracted as of late, but I don't see graduation rate here. There's some reason why, and I might be missing it.
On that one alone?
No, on all of them. And I assume it would be graduation rate from the prior year. Nobody's obviously expecting any projection for this year. But I didn't see, I saw attendance summary. And this is consistent with, you know, our finish line report. You know, you got incidences. Well, I don't know how I, yeah.
Can you just show that to Ray, so he can look at Ray? It should match exactly our finish line report for the
Should.
other departments, right?
Yeah, you would think so.
Or they can add another page.
Again, I can't tell you whether I got it in a Friday packet.
No, it was just that, so when we received the original budget book, we didn't receive it with the accountability data. And then it was subsequently provided, but it only provides the,
Attendance.
attendance, suspension data, et cetera. So I guess this is another request for.
So you would want all of the data, that we want all the data aligned with the district plans, which might mean pulling something off the computer and adding something, but it should be, right? ELA,
Well, ELA is in there for the, yeah.
graduation rates, attendance rates, and the suspension rates.
Well, attendance is in there. Everything is in there but graduation rates. So we'll just push those. Yep. So let me just say, without sounding critical, but I have to be honest, it is beyond comprehension. Again, I know this is a tough job, and let me tell you something. It's on the record. I have given my share of compliments. No one can dispute that. No one can say, wait a second, why is he beating up on us? I got to keep it real. I got to be honest, right? So if I'm going to give you all compliments, I got to be honest when I see you fall short. And I fall short too, by the way. Everybody falls short. And we should be willing to accept that. So having prefaced my remarks, let me say, it is beyond comprehension that and again, I might have missed it, that graduation rate data, I've been talking about this for damn near a decade, right? And that we would not have that is, and again, I realize I've talked about the great work that you all have done, but that would be left out. It is, again, I think the best word is beyond comprehension. We have. But here's the thing, Commissioner Elliott. I'll have these, and this is before Barbara got here or John was here. We do this up and down. Sometimes it's there, sometimes that. You know, the last meeting that I was at, I pointed out something that should have been there. It wasn't there. I thought we were having a cultural change, and that's why people say, why do you do those finish line reports? We were trying to change the culture to make sure people thought about graduation rates, attendance rates, suspension rates. So I'm making a systemic argument. I'm reminding you all that, and it shouldn't be a shock to anybody, that graduation rates are what drive what we do, and they drive why people are so critical of this district. Occasionally, bad things happen. Sadly, we lost a young man but that's an aberration. That doesn't happen much. But what people are focusing on when they talk about this district's failures, they're talking about our inability to graduate kids, get them off to college, and have them read and write and understand mathematics. Basic performance objectives, that we would leave it out. Again, don't get beat up by this. We all make mistakes. But we have to be honest. And the reason why I'm talking 5 minutes about this, and we'll be all right, we'll get out to our families. The reason why I'm talking about this is just amazing that we would leave this out. Now, Barbara, did I miss something? Because I might have missed
No, what I want to do is check and see the date of my signature, because we now have a system in place where there are multiple signatures. So I take full responsibility. I just want to check and see the date that I approved these. Because I'm looking at it and don't remember seeing it. So we could go back and look at the date that it was forwarded for final approval and see the approval process, so that you know, as we hold everyone accountable, and I will take full responsibility, everything comes with 2 signatures and dates to the superintendent's office for final signatures. That way we'll always be able to track the accountability on anything that is provided to the board or the public. So what I'm suspecting, Everton, and you can speak to this as well, that as we change the culture to ensure that there is absolute accountability for every metric with the 2 signatures, what you're seeing is the system builds, as we learned last year, builds the budget book in pieces. And this year, you might want to speak to what you talked about today to the executive team and what you're actually requiring everyone to do this year with the final budget book, because I think it will help answer some of our president's questions.
So first thing, I apologize for that not being there, but I'll let you know when we do the final budget book, it will be in it. I guarantee you that will be in it.
Thank you.
Because when we did the budget book before, it was left off, but we had the supplemental, but we needed to go back and look at all the measurements that needed to be there for all the schools. So the superintendent says she take responsibility. That gets passed to me because I'm the finance person. I take responsibility to make sure that that was supposed to be included. But one of the things that we did today in our executive cabinet, I've handed out our budget information to each of the chiefs for them to review everything that is going to be in the book, sign off on everything that's going to be in the book, get that back to me by Wednesday so we can start building the budget book. So everyone is signing off, and after they have signed off, then I review it. The superintendent is in the meeting. So we want to make sure that we are double checking and checking everything. So we just did that today, handed that out to them. So yes, we are changing the culture, and that's how we are signing off double on that. So for that document, it came after, I think, Commissioner Elliott asked about it, and we put it together and got it out. But again, we need to make sure that we signed off on that document.
The other thing is we've asked for the author of all documents to be located on the document with the date so that we should be able to see the name of the person that produced it, so that we can, again, document down to the original producer. So there'll be a person that's listed as producing it, the date, and that way we can keep track of different revisions. So again, this is a change to increase to accountability with double signatures, and you're going to still find errors, but then at least we can review the source of the errors and put the additional training pieces in place. So thank you, Everton.
Let me just note that, just so that we're clear, that document didn't reference graduation rates, and this budget book that we have didn't reference graduation rates. I'm not trying to beat the proverbial dead horse, but and I'm looking at you, to Everton, but my comments
That's
are really
fine.
to everybody.
That's fine.
To everybody. First of all, we all, not that anybody needs to hear this, but since I'm the one who seems to be beating this proverbial dead horse, let me remind you all that we all, present company included, make mistakes. Nobody is perfect, but we do have to know, and we have to be reminded when we make those mistakes, particularly when it comes to something that is so critical to our children's success. So, and again, I just want to emphasize the reason why this is bears so much significance to me is I had thought we had gotten to the point, Commissioner Elliott is correct, that it's been in there in years past, but other things have been missing. And now I'm finding out something else is missing in this particular budget presentation. And it makes me wonder, after all these years, 10 years to be exact, whether the cultural change that I was talking about, the nomenclature, the dialogue that we have about graduation, had everybody focus in on graduation rates. So it's not just the finance person, it's not just the deputy superintendents, it's the cafeteria lady. I mean, literally, I've said to Barbara, her phrase, every child by face and every student face and name, is a really good practical motto that allows for application. But if people, I mean, so if you really believe that phrase, you wouldn't pick up, not you particularly, Everton, but you wouldn't, no one would pick up a budget book that relates to the district's core performance objective, which is to graduate kids, and not notice that it's missing from 2 documents. Again, this is a point not intended to beat anybody's spirit away, because we all got tough jobs, but it's a point being made because it's a critical point. And this absence from both these documents provides, at least from my perspective, an opportunity to once again make the point that if we're going to be perceived as successful, it is going to be on this graduation rate thing. And I anticipate this June and August, people will feel a fresh sense of hope because of the work that people are doing in this district. But we've got to constantly remind ourselves during the course of the year, that's why we do these leadership meetings, we talk about the finish line reports, we talk about critical performance objectives throughout the course of the year, but if we're not at budget time talking about it, maybe the culture isn't there. So thank you very much for indulging me. I'm done, Vice President Powell. The gavel is yours.
Thank you. And I think just to speak to it from a slightly different angle, a lot of folks look at the budget book and think it's just the dollars, right? It's just the dollars. And they leave, folks who are listening out there, that leaves poor Everton trying to, like Atlas with the weight of the world on his shoulders. But it isn't just a budget book, is it? It's a reflection of everything that we do. It just happens to be through the lens of dollars and cents. So perhaps it's as much a reflection on how we view the financial department, and I hope, Everton, that you don't take it as a personal slight.
Never do.
So, all right.
Just clarification, I just want to readdress Commissioner Elliott's question about salaries at East. Those are the actual salaries. Carlene just confirmed it. And for clarity, both principals were principals in the district before the East, so we don't reset their salaries. If they were year 4 and they came to year 5, they just move up the scale automatically. So those two principals are not set. We didn't set those salaries. We just took them in and just moved them forward. All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Commissioner Powell, if I can say something. Let me just, in all comfort to you, let me just say, and you and I will understand this, love covers a multitude of sins. So I'm showing you love. Because I want you to be covered, and all of you to be covered. But I can remember the time, actually, when I first campaigned, we didn't have a budget book. This is what I campaigned on. This was under Manny Rivera. There was no budget available. So we've come a long ways. Manny was telling me, well, they're in the library. They were not available to the public, and certainly not in this format, because I campaigned on it. And so we've come a long ways. I think that there's always going to be continuous improvement. There's always going to be continuous improvement. And so while graduation rates may have been left out, here's an opportunity just to improve more. And so that's what we have to look at. And hopefully that couched you and gave you some love and restored your dignity.
Right. So here it is at 6:39, and we're just beginning to talk about the final third of the budget book. Those were the catch-up questions, as I understand it, and
We did that already.
Right, that's what I'm summarizing. Yeah, I'm just summarizing. Are there other, and I know that a couple of our commissioners were not here at last meeting because of the committee, Democratic committee. So if you have any other questions, Commissioner Funches, you took a pass. Are you caught up a little bit? Good. Okay, you're good for the last sections. Now, the goal here, besides getting through the last third of the book, is to identify those issues that would make it difficult to get to yes. In other words, is there any board member present who has a burning issue that this budget document does not address, a burning issue that's being funded and don't think it should be, or a burning issue that is not there and you think it should be? Those are the issues that, from a leadership point of view, we have to address between now and the vote on the budget book. So all the questions in the world, those are the final question is, what will it take to get to yes?
I don't know that I would phrase my comment, and it's a mixture of a comment and a question, but I wouldn't say it prevents me from getting yes, but I am concerned, not in a negative way, but concerned about the status of recommendations. I don't need an answer for this now. The Special Advisory Committee, I know Commissioner Funches has had a meeting today, and I want to make sure that those recommendations, which I think probably were finalized today, is that right? Yes. Have an opportunity to be comprehensively reviewed in our budget. Not looking for an answer now, but I know we made a commitment to Commissioner Funches and all those people that are working on that committee that we would take into account their recommendations, and obviously I would imagine some of them will have financial implications. So I would just say to Barbara, I'm looking forward to seeing how that works its way into the budget. We've talked about it preliminarily. There's money that's probably already going to some of this stuff already, but I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, Commissioner Funches?
The only, we had asked that. Can you? Oh, I'm sorry. Is that better? We had asked at the outset of the committee's work that nothing be moved, that everything that's currently in there be moved, and that we would ask to, what we want to do is get them to ramp back up, because there was a time when there was a lot of staffing stripped out of special ed to be able to get us back to a foreseeable level. The only other thing that's in there that I can say off the top of my head is that we are asking for there to be money to bring on, to do some consulting to help them in phase 2 around implementation. But I don't see, hold on, I will pull it up for you. Hold on.
Commissioner,
go ahead.
When you and I spoke last week.
Yes.
And sort of laid out that you want to see what actually is in the budget as compared to last year, where the additional flexibility is for things that may need to be determined after the fact. So we met today as a senior team, Everton, after Commissioner Funches sort of outlines what's needed. If you could just address what we discussed today, and he's doing the verification, and then we were going to sit down with you and actually do a check across.
And for my fellow commissioners, what I asked for was I wanted to find out where every dollar that was under the purview of special ed was, so that we could see where there is space, where there is wiggle room, where, if we need to shift things around, where the money is, so that we can find out what we're working with, because I understood where we were finishing up in the process. So I wanted to say, and I couldn't give an exact number of what we needed at that time, so I said, tell us what we've got so we can know, because the work that we're going to do is going to go over the next couple of years. It's not all going to happen all at once. So there's going to be things that are year 1, things that are year 2, things that are year 3. So I'm not worried. I'll just say that I'm not worried. But what I wanted to make sure was that that she did have room for things like ramping up of staff. But I do have a question. I know I said I was good, but I do have a question. Did we close the budget gap? If so, how did we close it? Where did the money come from? And what? Y'all thought y'all were gonna get by without that question?
Oh, I was going to ask it too, so.
Okay, so you're laughing at me, but it's like, separate and unrelated, well, it is related to this, but I want that question answered. But my thing is that I'm not worried. The only, in terms of the things for special ed, as long as we can make it work with what we have for this first year, the only thing I want is to have the funds to ramp up any necessary staff. And if that money is in there, if we know that we can reallocate and shift stuff to make it so we have staff to do the work, then I will be okay. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Address what you started out with special ed first. So today at our executive cabinet, one of the charge was, as I walked out, was to do the analysis on special ed. What we are going to be doing is, Rodney and I, we talked about it just before we came up here, is pull special ed numbers by every department. And when we say department, we mean schools and central office, how many FTEs are in those departments, the type of FTEs, we break that out, and identify where we have any reserve positions, if you will. I don't want to say any unallocated, because that's not a good budget thing to talk about. Right. So we did put about 10 FTEs in central office special ed department, that if numbers started to move, we actually have it in the budget and we can just move it from the centralized location to the different location. Is the 10 adequate? Don't know. But all the requests that came in from special ed is actually in the budget.
Okay.
To the point where I've even questioned that, do we have too many positions? Because everything that came in for special ed is in, and we still camped 10 FTEs. And I showed Rodney where there were, that in the event we fall short. We have that 10. So we are doing the analysis on the FTEs, And we are also going to provide another document, which is the dollars, how those FTEs get converted to dollars, and all the contracts that we have for specialized service in the budget.
Okay.
So we're going to be doing that tomorrow and Wednesday. But we just got the charge today, and we wanted to come here.
I'm good.
But we're already down the path of doing that. So just to let you know, the challenge is, as we move forward, if a request comes up, we do not have a contingency fund that we can tap into.
Okay.
So that's why we make sure that all the budgeted FTEs are in.
Right.
In the past, we would have a contingency, and we could say, if something happens, then we have a little contingency here. But for this year, we have none.
Okay.
So we made sure that all the requests that came in is there. So if someone says, well, I need 5 more FTEs, we'd have to find someplace else to take it from,
Okay.
to put it in the budget. So that's what, as it relates to special ed.
Okay.
As it relates to the balancing of the budget, that's one of the budget is not yet balanced. So we are working on that. That's why we hand out everything back to the executive team, and they're charged to get that back to me on Wednesday. So this week we will be working on making sure it balances. We have a couple places that we can do a little tweaks here and there to make sure it balances, but it is not as yet. So we are working with the numbers. Rodney's running his number. I'm running his numbers. When we get these documents back, we're going to meet as executive and go through these numbers again.
And Everton, just can you add also what we discussed? Because when people look at the amount that needs to be balanced, there were some guidelines given about what they're not to eliminate or reduce or touch, right?
Yes.
What were those?
The directive was we should not be reducing anything from the schools. Straight up. So everything that we have been doing, and I know Commissioner Elliott mentioned it once, so if we have done all we can, and we look at the schools, can we look at, I think her words were, if we have done everything else and we still are short, our schools are off the table. But I tell you, we have not touched anything to do with the schools. So the level of service that the schools have this year, we have not only kept it that way, but in some instances, it has gone up. FTEs have gone up, and I think that's where Commissioner Elliott had made a question. So that was our main directive. We looked at central office, we looked at the operation team, we looked at everything else. Last night, I went through the budget, late last night again, and found some FTEs that are in central office that I'll be talking with the team about. Can we not do this? Can we do this? But none of those on my list has anything to do with the schools. We didn't touch the schools. But are we going to close the gap with that? We're going to meet as a team, and we're going to work it out.
Okay. Just to test my understanding. So you and Rodney are going to get together, and I'm going to be able to get like a comprehensive, expansive report of special ed that includes FTEs, specialized services, and all that.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm concerned that we don't have a contingency. What happens over the next school year if we have another, disaster like in Puerto Rico? I'm concerned about that. And the next question is, how much of a contingency, what's the percentage of the budget that should be allocated for contingency? I'm concerned about that because there's just been so many crises. Well, there's crisis after crisis in our world. And if we have some crisis that's going to bring people here to Rochester, that we have to educate the children, or whatever crisis may come up. My concern is that we don't have contingency funding. Now, what I don't want to hear is that F word, the fund balance, right? So, because I just think that even with what we are going, the financial challenges, and one of the questions I was going to ask you related to special education is there funding available on the state level or the federal level for special education in case we need to get additional dollars? But I'm concerned that we're going into a direction that's going to put our budget in a position that we probably don't want to go. And what do we do for future years? I don't want us to be careless around. We got to have a healthy financial position, and I believe that if we begin to not have a contingency, and then if something comes up in the future, and, you know, we got to go to that F word, and it seriously concerns me about the future state of the Rochester City School District's finances. Can you respond to that?
And thank you, Commissioner Elliott, and I share some of those sentiments as well. So as it relates to the contingency, as we talked about it a couple months ago, the direction was we will run the budget in the current year, and if and when there is a need, if there is an emergency, the state-aid financing rule allows you to go into your fund balance and do that if we have an emergency. But as we run the budget through the year, then one of the things that we will notice that, especially with our vacancies and stuff, you have this up and down challenges. And the directive was, in the event we are coming close to the end of the year, we wouldn't do this like September or October or November. We'd wait until see how the year is going, maybe about this time next year. And then if we see that we're running out of funds, then that's when we would bring a resolution to the board to go and do a reappropriation of funds and do that. So during the year, the risk is when you have a contingency is that people will know that it's there, so they will come with their hands out every time because they will know the contingency is there.
Is that what happened with us this time? We knew it was
yes
there,
and
so
no. The thing is, when a request comes in for funds from the contingency, it doesn't just flows in and we move the money. We always bring it to, and it usually gets bumped up to executive cabinet as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then we throw it around and say, yes, this is needed. Many of the times it's for the schools. Schools are shifting their stuff. Things are happening in the school and we are reacting to those. Positions need to be added because of the bilingual community. That's increasing the ESL community. And those happen through the PMAF process as we make the changes. So because we have the contingency, we will run that in and out of the contingency fund. So not having that now, the discipline is this. When you come, because we are funding everything for the schools, what's happening. When somebody comes and say, I need this, the question is, where are you going to get the offset? So if I need a position in my department, I have to go see Bo to say, do you have a couple dollars you can throw over here? Because gone were the contingency days.
As they say in my community, let me hold two.
Yes. And that's the discipline and the behavior that we are going to have, because gone were the days where you just have the contingency, you just go in and balance it out. And you use the balance, the contingency fund as your control account. Money goes in, money comes out. There are times where certain things would come into the district. Say we won a lawsuit and we put it in our judgment and claims. So it would flow up and down, but now we have nothing to float up and down. So we have to be very, very disciplined.
Well, the other piece too, I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to continue to mention it until, you know, people are awakened about this and not afraid. You know, 60 or 70% of that budget is in personnel costs. We've just had to we're funding a salary increase. We really are going to have to begin to look at, for example, under benefits, can we continue to afford to pay for retiree benefits, for example? And some other things that we have to look at. Can we continue to do this? I mean, because where's the money coming from? If we can't have a unstable or an unhealthy financial position, you know, can we negotiate, when we begin to negotiate contracts, can we look at negotiating at a smaller rate? You know, so instead of, I think, 3.7% an hour, why can't we do it 2% an hour? Those costs, what we've discovered, and particularly when Assemblyman David Gant was fighting this, when they come to the state asking for $20 million, that is to pay for the increase, right? So we're giving people money, and I don't have a problem with giving people money when we got it, and if they're doing the right job. We don't have it, but we're still giving these kinds of exorbitant increases. We can't afford it. Some places are not getting increases. You know, I come from the nonprofit. We don't get those kinds of increases, sometimes for years. So we really, and I'm going to keep this in the forefront because we really have to begin to negotiate benefits and salary increases. I'm not saying we don't pay people, but do we have to continue to give a 3.7% increase, which comes out to be around $20 million of our budget? Really? We can't continue to afford that. That would help me in my contingency fund. So that's all I'm going to say. I will close by saying this, Mr. CFO and the Budget Director. I appreciate all of what you have done. I think it's a healthy, I love the budget book. What is the reason that I asked for the information I asked to go in this? Because this book is also used for research. I remember when I was working on my first master's degree, I took a budgeting course from the former deputy county manager here, Barry Jesmer, and I did a research paper on the city's budget. I got an A on it, you know. So I'm a little sensitive to it because if research is done they need to have a comprehensive book. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everton?
Yes.
I have one other question. I've asked this before. What is our unassigned fund balance and what is our assigned fund balance? How much?
Our total fund balance for this year.
Is there a page you can?
Oh, it's not in this book. It's in the CAFR. That's where it is, because this is a budget. The CAFR is your annual, your comprehensive plan because of your balance sheet and everything, and that's where that resides. It's in the 70 million. We can find that number. But as it relates to fund balance, there are 5 components of that. You have what we call the restricted, which is a component like inventory, that you can't spend that money, or prepaid expenditures for insurance that you can't spend that money. You have another category that we call committed. The committed section is the area where the board had made a decision to commit that dollars, like the resolution that we passed last week for the OPEB. It was sitting there and it only can be removed when the board authorizes it. And then you have, the 2 lower ones are assigned fund balance, which is not voted on by the board, but that can be specific for certain things, like if we're going to invest in information technology improvement, then we just put some money there to plan for that. And then we have the unassigned fund balance. That unassigned fund balance is the free-flowing money that can be used. At this point in time, at the close of last fiscal year, that was $8.4 million. In addition to the $8.4 million, there is a commitment of another $20.2 or $20.3 million that we had made a decision in 2011, and it's just been sitting there. Our auditors said you need to move it out and put it in your unassigned, because the GASB rule said that when you book your OPEB, which is other post-employment benefit, like Commissioner Elliott was talking about, benefits for retirees, you have to budget for it in one of 2 ways. Either you put it as a reserve, or you put it in the expenditures. What we did back in 2011, we put it in both places. And it has been sitting there, the $20 million been sitting there until I started reviewing it. And I said, why is this sitting here? Moody ratings say you need to take it out, because when they rate us, they include it in the bottom because they said you guys need to take it out and put it at the bottom. So all the rating agency, our auditors, the state controllers said, you just have this sitting there. So that's why last week when we put the OPEB resolution in, it was to move it and put it down at the bottom. So technically, we have about $28 28, almost $29 million in unassigned fund balance. The board has a policy that says we shouldn't have more than 5% of our unassigned fund balance. And we're a little bit over that. So as it relates to being in fiscal stress, we're not in fiscal stress because every time every rating agency looks at it, the question is, why do you have that $20 million sitting there? So after many months, we said, and I know we spoke to Commissioner Vice President Powell about it, and we made it. We tried doing it a couple months ago, but we had to do the background. So it's just this month, last week, that we put it in and say, let's really move it because it doesn't belong there. So our unassigned fund balance, free-flowing money we can use in the event we have an emergency, is basically around $30 million. Now, the other OPEB thing that's going to happen that we have to implement this year is the GASB, I think it's 75, that says the $20 million was like 1 year expenditure, and in our budget, we have that 1 year also. The GASB rule this year, we have to implement it that says not only do you have to have the expenditure for current year, we want you to put on your books the liability for the rest of the life for all those people who are retirees that you have this money for. So in our, I know we are, but in our resolution, you saw us putting through actuarial contract for Aquarius. They are the actuarials who come in and look at your longevity or all those things and say, this is the number that needs to be on your books. And I can say now it's going to be around about $550 million. Right now, we only have about $235 million on the book. So when we do our next CAFR, that's going to jump up to about $550 million. It's not just for RCSD. The city is going to have to put theirs on, and basically every governmental agency in the country is going to need to put that on their books. Every one of them. So everybody is crying, and the GASB, which is the Government Accounting Standard Board, they have delayed it for about 3-4 years, but now they say that's it. So it doesn't impact your budget. It's just a liability that you put on your book. In business, in the corporate world, you would have the liability, but you'd also have the asset, which somebody is holding that money as a custodian for the benefit for your pension for your retirees. We don't have that.
And I just have one other question. So in reference to retirees, have we done any analysis to determine if the lifespan of our retirees have increased? Because if it is increased, that means that, we're continuing to pay for those benefits for a longer period of time. Do we have any analysis of that?
And that's what our actuaries are going to do.
Okay.
They're the ones who take the numbers, go in history, see everybody who is at certain age and the lifespan and the death rate, all that, what Social Security is going to pay. They go through a lot. And we can't do it in-house, and that's a very expensive service. If you're an actuarial, you're in high demands. So they're going to do that, and we have the contract we're putting through. So when that happens, they give us the report, and it comes to the board, the actuarial report. The good thing, just to let you know, is that we, along with the city, are using the same actuarial. So when we went out to bid, we bid as a unit, so we got better price. Because the same actuarials that's doing it for the city, they're doing it for us as well. So we collaborated, so we got good price on that.
Okay, I'm testing my understanding.
Yes.
You're saying that the unassigned fund balance is 28, almost 29 million.
Yes.
But it's really not. It's really like 8 million because the other 20, it's like this is my rent money. All right, I got it. It's in here, but it's really for something else, right?
No. In years past, we put that money aside for the payment for retirement for 1 year. But what we have done is that sat there for 1 year, for that year, but we also included the same money in our budget every year. So we have been doing it twice. So it's in the current budget, but you still have it over here. And nobody went back to look at it and say, you shouldn't have it two places, because the GASB rules say you either commit it or you budget it. But we were doing both. So that $20 million that was sitting there was booked in 2011, because that's when the GASB came out, and I guess at the time they didn't understood it, so they said, let's book it. But every year, we still book the expenditure for the payment, basically for health insurance for these retirees. So the health insurance, as you look at it, you'll see it's running about $84 million. So about 20 million of that relates to the retirees. But that $20 million is still sitting over here, so there's no need to have it there anymore. It was just sitting there. And we couldn't take it out unless the board does a resolution to relieve it. And that's why we brought it to the board last week.
So in other words, we were paying for retiree benefits from our checking account.
Right.
But we also had a savings account, or a
With retiree
certificate of deposit
Yes.
that we weren't touching, that because GASB said we had to.
Right.
That $20 million has been there, even though we were paying for the retiree benefits out of our
current budget.
Out of our current budget, i.e. our checking account. So in fact, our fund balance is actually, our unassigned fund balance is actually post Thursday's resolution is
Right.
actually $20 million larger
Right.
than now than it was before Thursday.
Right. And the other thing is, when our credit rating agency looks at it, they see the $8.4 million, and as they view our document, they say, what is this? And we tell them, and they said, oh, so your actual unassigned fund balance is the 20 plus the 8. We're like, why? We said, because the rule says you can't do both. So they add it in when they're rating us.
So why did we do that?
It's back in 2011, and I think what happened, this is a speculation, is that when the rule came out, they didn't fully understand it. So in order to be conservative, they put it there, and then they also budgeted it, and nobody went back to revisit it. So from year to year, CFOs is there, and it rolled over. So it wasn't until and that's why it's nice to go to PD. I was at the GFOA conference, May of, not this year, the year before, when I was going through, and I'm thinking, I heard it, and it said, you can't do both. You have to do one or the other. So I stepped out of the training, and I called Carrie Couples, and I said, why did we do that in 2011? And she explained, I said, we need to undo that, because the rule says you can't do both. You do one or the other.
Because wouldn't the budget have been less?
Back in those
Budget
years?
submitted would have been less?
Yes.
Okay.
If we decided to keep it in the reserve versus carrying it in your current balance. But if we decide to carry it in our current year's budget, then that just means that your fund balance goes up. So even though you see us using that much out of our fund balance, it's basically like restoring what happened then to your fund balance. That's what it is.
Okay. I know I'm sounding thick.
That's
okay, fine. I know how this is, but help me to understand. Okay. So, because the root of this is we're using our fund balance, we use the fund balance to balance the budget.
Yes, we do use our fund balance to balance the budget.
So So what you're telling me is that we've got like an extra 20 million, like from like the lint in the back of the closet, right? I'm just saying.
Yes.
That's a lot of lint, right? But no, I'm being facetious. I am. So, but no, because that does, I still don't.
All right, let me try another. No, let me try another method. Let me try another method. We used $20 million to balance the budget this year.
Right.
All right. In our budget, in our balance sheet, in our liability, we have another $20 million sitting there.
Okay.
We also have in our budget, this year's budget, $19.5 million that we're going to pay to retirees. You with me?
Uh-huh.
If we take that out, our budget gap would be less. because the $20 million that was booked in 2011 is sitting there. The rule is you can't put it in your liability and put it in your budget also.
Okay.
So if we were to take it out of our...
Wait, stop right there. I think, okay, what I hear in what you're saying is, I'm gonna make it into regular people, regular money terms.
All right,
I had to pay my county taxes.
right.
My county taxes, so I knew county taxes were coming, county taxes was $1,000. So my mama gave me $1,000, so I put $1,000 up in October, knowing taxes were coming in January, so I put it up over there. But when January came, I had $1,000, so I paid the taxes with the $1,000 that I had, but I still had this $1,000 sitting over here that my
Right.
mama gave me back in November.
Yes,
So now I have this basically $1,000, but I can't keep it over here.
Right.
So I've got to move it over here into my kitty.
exactly.
Is that what's happening?
That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
But when you're ready to pay your taxes, you found out that you only have 500. You with me?
Yeah.
So instead of putting your hand over to your right, you have another little set of money over to your left that you took the $500 out to balance to pay your taxes. But you still have that $1,000 over there that you need to bring in because it's
So I
your...
thought it was 1,000, and I had 1,000.
Oh, it
when
is
January
1,000.
came, And that, okay,
But at the time when you're about to pay it,
right.
you find yourself with only 500.
I got it.
So
I
you
had-
dip into Commissioner Elliott.
And she gave me two.
She gave you two, and you pay your bill, and you're fine.
But I still got this $1,000.
You still have the $1,000, but that money over there, you didn't have to do that because you have the $1,000, so you're moving it back in.
Got it. Now, all right, given all that.
Yes.
If we, because now I also remember from a previous thing that we had regularly be dipping into the fund balance for a minute now.
Yes.
To balance us. I know you said we are not in financial stress now.
Right.
If we keep doing that at the rate that we've historically been doing it, how long is it going to be before we're in trouble?
If you continue down the path that we are, it would be somewhere between the next 3 to 5 years.
Thank you. I'm good now.
But,
That's too soon.
but,
No, okay,
that will not happen under my watch. I'm just letting you know.
okay.
It's not going to happen under my watch. Because one of the things that we are doing, we're changing behaviors as to how we do what we do. We are doing that. Our team is moving down the path. And that's why I said when people come and say, well, I need this, no, you have to take it from somewhere. Because a part of my goal that the superintendent gave, and the board gave, is that we have a strong fund balance. So that's what we are working towards, building up our fund balance. So every year, the plan is, like for this year, to put money back into fund balance. And every year to take, if we're doing anything, so that the $20 million we have to take it down. And my goal for the next 5 years is to only be taking out single-digit millions, low single-digit millions out of the budget. My goal is over 5 years to only be taking out $6 million out of fund balance. That's my goal. So,
What is the range? And this is my last question. Because I'm really, really trying to understand. What is the range that like the credit people and all people say is a good range for, you said 5%.
well, the rule is for central school districts is that your fund balance, unassigned fund balance, should not be more than 5% of your next year's operating budget. Because what you're doing is, if you have money sitting there, they're saying that you're taxing the taxpayers to keep it as savings. And they're not going to do that because they're not going to vote on it. So the rule is you should only have no more than 4%, and this is operative for the central school districts. If a central school district has more than 4% of the next year's operating budget in their fund balance, the Office of State Controller comes and write them up and say you need to reduce that and give the money back to the people. And you've seen where some little districts, some counties, some schools, some cities had to give money back to their taxpayers because that amount was over the 4%. You can have a fund balance for committed dollars or reserve for specific things. If you're going to build a dam, if you're going to implement a new computer system, but it has to be specific to those things. You can't just tax the people and say, I'm going to keep it in my pocket for savings. They said you can't do that. So It's 4%. So we have one that says 5%. So we are, when I checked it, like, again, because Commissioner Elliott always asks, always a fund balance, I checked it again. I gave her a copy of the policy that says we are within the range, and we are good.
A lot of this conversation is around what's been historically called the structural budget gap. The fact that our costs do increase faster than our revenues. My message every year has been a plea that we get more involved in advocacy and asking the state for more funds. This is a perfect year to demonstrate that, because initially a lot of our budget gap, when it was first presented to us back in January, what was it, $60 million gap, was the I wants. It included, especially from Dr. Guillory's areas of control, additional FTEs to do special ed, additional FTEs to do CTE, additional FTEs for socio-emotional supports, psychologists, caseworkers. Those were the I wants, and because revenues were not as big as we wanted them to be, even the I wants had to be cut. Sadly, when we put out a number that includes the I wants versus strictly a go forward, doing everything exactly the way we did last year budget, the public says, well, there it is. You closed that budget gap somehow. Maybe that wasn't really, maybe you really didn't need that money after all. Well, we do need resources if we're going to really provide the wraparound care that our children need. And when the money isn't there, we're not going to be able to give exactly what we want. The fact that we're able to come up with $60 million additional dollars, or that's exaggerating, because not all of it was the I want. Some of it really was just, 3% salary increases and 11% healthcare cost increases and TRS, CRS. But the fact that we had, the fact that we had to roll back on our I wants communicates to some people in our larger community, especially in Albany, that we didn't really need that. Well, the way I interpret that is, if we were to get the funding that the Contract for Excellence said we were supposed to get, we do know how to spend it. We have a plan on how we could use the funding if the state were to come through on its promise. We should be taking that message to Albany and saying, it's time for you folks to deliver. You've made the argument that if we got all the money we were supposed to get, we wouldn't even know how to spend it. Well, we do know what our kids need, and we have a plan, but we have to keep paring that plan back in order to meet the revenue stream that we actually have. We haven't gone into specifics in these last three sections, and I don't know if it's because we don't have real questions about that.
No, we did go through them.
Okay.
At least I think
Are we
did.
happy with, has everyone asked the questions they want on
Commissioner
sections
Funches
3,
made,
4, on 7, 8, and 9?
Commissioner Funches may have questions because she passed, but she's on the phone right now.
Right. I do have a question on section 9, which is the capital improvement plan. Yes. So this is a document, usually comes, it's usually a substantial document that accompanies our budget. It almost never gets to us until the last day of our budget deliberations every year. And we do have an attachment that came to us by email on Saturday. If you didn't print it, it'll still be in your email inbox, and we will be getting a print copy.
I'm not sure yet, it's still being printed, it's still being finalized.
Okay, we may see it. I'm going to ask that a special courier delivery be made as soon as it's available, rather than waiting for the Friday packet. Mr. Schmidt, could you just talk us through, the capital improvement plan is a rolling 5-year document. So much of its contents was already approved in previous budget cycles, especially for the work that's being done this year, next year. But could you talk to us about what the current thinking, the current plan is for CIP dollars
Sure.
for next year?
Absolutely. When the word substantial and my name is always used together, I always get a little bit nervous, though, so we'll try not to use that very often. So the capital improvement document is 44 pages long. It has an awful lot of items that are kind of similar to the Path Forward materials that were sent. There's some enrollment projections, there's some financial projections, there's some other items there that are good background information that kind of tie some of the pieces together. There's also references and alignment with our facility modernization program. And then in the second half of the document outlines the prospects that are projected for or planned for this summer that you actually approved, in a sense, last year, much like you will do the following summer in this document. So I can go through those briefly. One thing that you'll note is we are consistently doing work on recreation centers. So you'll see last year you earmarked funding for the number 9 school, the Clinton Baden project that's in there. So that work will be going on upcoming, as well as the Flint Street Center will also have work upcoming. Whenever we have a recreation center that's attached to a school, we're using that area for physical education, the arts, and so forth, so that it is eligible for reimbursement. So it's very strategic for our community to continue to upgrade those centers, but also obviously doing it in line with what the regulations would state. In addition to the projects for this coming summer, we have substantial work being done at School 25. I would reference that only in School 44. Those are 2 buildings that have kind of been in and out of conversation. You had a recommendation before you last Thursday evening around School 44. Those are buildings that we continue to do upgrade work or mechanical system work and that type of thing, roofs and so forth, because we're going to have students in those facilities for the foreseeable future, whatever we choose to use them for in terms of our own decisions. So you'll see those on there. One thing that the City Council abides us to with our capital work, which is different than modernization, is that there are very strict guidelines in the ordinance in terms of what we are able to use these resources for, mainly around health and safety, infrastructure, that type of thing. Building items that are found in the building condition survey would be eligible, for the most part, to be utilized with capital funds. So 25 and 44 are in this queue. School number 19, as I said, that's the Flint Street Center. School number 33, school number 52, 57, and the other elementary school is 41. And that's significant, much because of the academic piece going on, much of the work around that it's a community school. The work there is going to be a 2-summer project. This summer is roof, window work, and some other infrastructure work. Next summer, we're hoping to, if approved, hoping to do some significant cafeteria work there, as well as some work in the main office. If you've been to that building, the cafeteria is kind of split across the hallway. It's just not suitable for us. So that'll be next summer's work, and you'll kind of see that referenced in the plan. We also have work at 2 high school, one other K-8 building, Wilson Foundation. If you note this in the plan, we're having some trouble with the foundation at Wilson Foundation, arguably. We have some sinkage or some oscillating in there, so we're going to do some pilot work this summer to kind of find out the sourcing of that and then kind of figure out what the next step would be. So you'll see that as a very small project, but obviously very significant. Central office, if you recall, we had a generator issue here where we had to evacuate the building. The generator did not operate properly. It's located inside the building in the basement. It is not suitable it's suitable for a very short-term power outage, but because our network infrastructure is here in this building, our disaster recovery, much of our accountability data is located here, just not prudent for us to have a generator that does not maintain the full effectiveness of this building for an indefinite amount of time. So we are going, you'll see a reference in here for us to put a brand-new generator. We can't put that in the building, so it'll be located outside the building, but that's a significant capital resource for us to be able to, if we've lost power here 3 times in my 5 years, of 6 years of being with the district. So we know that it needs to be, and there's usually a race against the clock to get us back online before our network would happen to crash. We got about 90 minutes of backup power the way under battery. So we really need to make that happen. So that'll be work that'll be ongoing, as well as work at Franklin School. So it's very significant, and I think the key piece to it, last thought, is it's supplemental to what's going on in modernization. So you'll see very, very infrequently that we'll have work in our capital program in buildings that are in the facility modernization queue. Now, one of the anomalies in that is some of our facilities, East, for example, Edison, are so large and so all-encompassing that when we do it in phases, it's really not realistic to think that we would not be coming back to one of those larger facilities to do a capital project, whether it be an elevator replacement or whatever it might be, before the building comes back into the modernization queue. So that's referenced. And then the other piece in there is it does, and I thought Commissioner Powell, or Vice President Powell, you're referring to the document. I did share some of the timelines with our modernization, some of the revised timelines that'll be in your Friday packet, and that's also, the schools are referenced in here, but some of those timelines oscillate around bid work and some of those things. So some of the things you see here may not be quite in real time. So we'll try to update you on an as-needed basis if those times tend to flex. So hopefully I captured the high points in that.
Commissioner Funches, the question I asked was, the capital improvement plan is a separate document that's delivered with our budget. Usually, right about now, the third phase of our deliberation. You received it via an email on Saturday, and the summary that Mr. Schmidt just gave really kind of starts on page 31 to the end in terms of outlining the specific work that's being suggested for summer of 2019.
Yes.
Basically.
That's one of the delays in terms of providing the materials. We go through the process now to try to take as much time to outline work for the following summer. So that's the piece of it. And that's building leadership, district leadership. We certainly consult with the city prior to that, especially when it involves rec centers. And then our building condition survey kind of lines up with that also. So it's kind of a multi-part piece, which is kind of why it's always somewhat in draft. So but this is the most finalized it'll probably be for a while.
Could you make sure they put the extra T on my last name?
Will I make sure they put it? You can have as many T's as you like.
I want what's mine.
You're going to have
I need another T.
Duly noted.
It's 2 T's.
2 T's, got it.
But a question I do have, do we receive capital dollars for those schools that are in receivership?
There is flow-through money on the academic side that I think Beth could.
I'm talking about capital
We don't
now.
receive,
Okay.
nothing additional. I mean, 98% is 98%. They don't get any additional reimbursement.
Okay.
But one thing we are able to do, if I might, is there are community facility dollars that are tied to some of the community school grants that we've been able to supplement those buildings to get some additional work done.
All right. GC, do you have any questions?
Make a note of that one. 2 T's and Elliott.
Nope, I'm all set.
Thank you. All set. Commissioner Elliott.
Just the extra T.
I got you. And that
Thank
spa
you.
will be finished at the Baden Center just for you. We'll take care of that as well.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Commissioner Funches? Commissioner Hallmark? I'm good. You're good? Commissioner White?
Yeah, just a
President
comment.
White.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Just a quick comment, and it's going to sound like a broken record, but because I've said this about Mike before. Mike, I'm never, I'm always amazed at how comprehensively you don't have to sit down for this, Mike. I'm not going to ask you to say anything. It's not a question. It's a compliment. I'm always amazed at how comprehensively you know our district and the things that our district needs. And there was a time when I first started off here, there was a gentleman here in this building. Everybody always turned to him because he seemed to know the ins and outs of the building. And they didn't seem to have someone at that level, your level, to do that. It seemed to require that this person who was really closer to the buildings, but you just I don't care what the issue is, whether it's a particular controversy that parents have over schools or the FMP, you always seem to know, and I just think you must have like this perfect memory. So I just want to say thank you. Job well done, as always. And then to our finance leader, again, same kind of compliment. And Barbara, this is a indirect of complimenting you because you have these people on your staff, but I know particularly brilliant, that you, you know, decided to go with Everton, and the way in which I was listening to the dialogue with Commissioner Funchess, and I said this before, but it's worth repeating. The way in which you describe things, it's never been described at that level in this building. And you and Barbara are to be commended at your ability to do that. And then the other thing that I really liked, and I said this to a principal, I was at a leadership meeting, remember this, Barbara? Some principal said, well, I'm just going to do it, and if I get in trouble, then I'll do it. Man, that's what leadership is about. Don't be sitting here worrying about what Barbara or you know, what voter's going to say. Just do it, because this is what our kids require. And you said, not on my watch. And you were dead serious, man, and that's a leadership statement, and we should recognize that. Our kids need people who are going to say, not on my watch. Our taxpayers need that, so I wanted to compliment you on that. I thought it was very, and I'm not saying this because you might have thought that I was coming down hard on you, because I wasn't. I'm saying this, what I'm saying now, because it's the truth, and what I said 20 minutes ago is the truth. But when you were talking to us throughout the whole course of this conversation, you have spoken to this board, and by the way, the community, in a way that no one in your position has done that before, and I want to thank you and Barbara for doing that.
To follow that, I would simply add that a lot of times during the budget season, the CFO is the heavy, right? He's the guy that's got to close the gap, and a lot of, in my experience, educators don't have an eye for their pocketbook. It's outside their wheelhouse, to borrow someone else's phrase. It's like just a miracle occurs, and there's always money for FTEs and what have you, right? But we need to build capacity. We need, in this organization, to understand the financial side. I've often said that a building principal is like a battalion or a brigade commander. He's not just in charge of the training of the troops. He's in charge of feeding them and housing them and the supply building that provides their clothing and equipment and the motor pool that supplies their transportation. The principal has to have an understanding of the whole organization and its cost as well. And to the extent that that understanding reaches all the way up to the highest levels of cabinet, you should have allies. You should have peers who are able to help you close that budget gap year after year and support you when you say the money's not there for that ask that you just gave, you know. I want to thank you for being the heavy. It's a hard time of year for you, and I know it's been a lot of long sleepless nights, and I know that's true of everyone at the cabinet level, because Everton doesn't make those decisions in isolation, right? You have to get buy-in from everyone in order to close those budget gaps, and I appreciate your effort. I'm going to give everybody a chance to say their thank yous, but again, once again, I have to ask the question, what do you need, my colleagues, to get to yes? We don't want a surprise on the day that we do the budget vote. We do not need surprises. Now is the time to tell us what you need to get to yes. Okay? So I'll go down the line again.
I'm very happy right now. I just want to say this is my third budget I've been through, and with each year it gets clearer and more thorough, and I just want to appreciate the cabinet for all your work. It's very confidence-inspiring, and I appreciate the superintendent's work over the cabinet. Thanks.
I'm golden. I understand and I thank you for me being incredibly new to this process, that you're willing to break this down and like mother talk, like regular people speak, so that I can have an understanding. And thank you for this, and when I don't understand, being able to flip it this way, flip it that way, and keep trying with me until I get it. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Let me say that prior, for the most part, in the past, prior to the current superintendent, I've always voted no on budgets. And I've always voted no because the community has always said it's too much money. And I don't know if I'm going to say yes this time necessarily. I don't want to make that decision now. But what I will say is that we're going to have to look at the costs. And that's why I've always voted no on it before, because when we get $20 million from the state, it goes to salaries, right? So we're going to have to begin to look at renegotiating the amount of money that we give in terms of contracts, right? So we're going to have to look at that. And then I also have to go back out into the community and get beat up because we got a billion dollar budget. So I'm not saying that I'm not going to vote on it, but I am saying that particularly in the future, that's what's going to be, I'm basing whether or not I'm going to vote in support of it in the future based on how we're going to negotiate contracts with the unions. Thank you.
Okay, President White?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank Kalia, who's sort of back there and nobody seeing her back there, but she's done some exceptional work. We complimented you the other night at our board meeting, but you probably were home getting some much-needed rest. But thank you for your work. Thanks.
Yes, and always with a smile, a big, bright, beautiful smile. Commissioner Elliott's last remark did make me think of something I wanted to share with my colleagues. When we go out in the community and people say, you know, just 2 years ago, it was only $750 million, and now it's 9/10 billion dollars, and why is it growing so fast? And, you know, this is too much money. I have to remind you that when I started on the board, it was just below $500 million. So in 20 years, it's gone up almost double. And it's easy to say, well, we just went crazy spending money, but I will tell you what's driving it is the FMP. Our debt service is the item in our budget that has received the greatest increase aside from ERS, TRS. Am I right? And so when we go out in the public and people start to tell us we're spending money like it's water. I'm sorry, teacher retirement system and employee retirement system for non-teachers. Yes, yes. Thank you for calling me on that. Right. Thank you for calling me on that. But so we're spending money on capital work that is reimbursed by the state. So it's we spend the money, we bond it, we receive a reimbursement from the state. All of that funding would not be flowing if it were not for the FMP. So let's not confuse the ongoing business of educating our students with the cost that the state bought into of modernizing our schools. Our debt service is so high that while other districts across the state and country spend 70% on personnel costs, our percentage of personnel costs is actually less than virtually everyone else in the state because our debt service is such a large portion of our budget. So we have an obligation to talk to our community about what's driving the dollars. We have to keep that in mind. It's not a positive, it's not a negative, it just is. It's what the state agreed to do on our behalf with the facilities modernization, and no one's talking about going backward from that. We're committed to that. But that is the biggest driver over the last, how long has facilities modernization been a thing, Mr. Schmidt?
2007, I believe, maybe more longer than that.
For the last 10, 12 years?
Yeah.
So, just, if we understand that, then we can help our constituents understand that.
Can I just sort of piggyback on what you're saying? It actually goes back to around 2007 when Manny Rivera was here, because
The legislation. Right.
because when it was first presented, Commissioner Powell, that's one of the things I asked about, the local share. That could we afford, even though the state was giving us, the money, there was still a local share that we had to pay. And I asked Manny back during that time in 2007, this is how far it goes back, were we able to cover that cost? And, I'm new, I didn't get on the board until 2006, so I couldn't, I had to have faith in what was being told to me, because the question I asked is that if we have to pay for this, does it make sense for us to get, to receive the FMP funding? Mm-hmm. And how would that impact our operating budget?
Well said. And in fact, in the beginning.
In 2007.
In fact, in the beginning, we almost couldn't afford it. Mm-hmm. It was only when they increased the reimbursement level to 98%. That was not our reimbursement level when the facilities modernization plan was first brought into law and first rolled out. So it's actually, we've started to kind of integrate the whole thing into our financial systems and our way of doing things, but it's still, it still wreaks havoc. The swing space is, we still haven't figured that part out entirely, and that has budget implications too, especially with, if school 40, which one is the one on Chile Avenue?
44.
44, thank you. If 44 is going to remain open, and not if, but because 44 is going to remain open as its current school community, then all plans to use it as swing space are off the table. So now we have to come up with some other options. So just as an example of, if it's not one thing, it's another. So once again, I want to thank everyone for their hard work. As I count it, the budget will pass, but we need a clean document. You know what we need in terms of the specific pages. We need to see clearly where the balancing act has evolved to since what we have was printed, and we should get that prior to the budget vote so that we can all digest that. But as an act of faith, I'm seeing at least 4 votes in favor of it right now on a straw poll. So thank you so much for your time and your commitment, everyone. All the folks in the audience that remain nameless. Any alibis, last questions are due to Kalia tomorrow noon. If you go home and your head hits the pillow and you remember something you didn't ask, you still have one more shot at it, okay?
And if anybody wants any chocolate candy, see Amy, she's...
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn? I have a motion from Commissioner Funches.
Second.
A second from President White. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
You don't have a vote.
Night.
Yep.
My daughter just called. Oh, okay. Hold on. Okay, what that call was.
That we have to do because
All right.
Okay. Yeah, that people,
So there's
We're on Thursday.
We're in New York Wednesday night. Give my tea, man. No, it wasn't like that last year. Give me my tea. Yeah, but no, I'm used. No, y'all took my tea off. I want my tea. Well, the tea is left off? The tea wasn't left off?
Reference anywhere else in the thing.
Yeah, give me my tea. Thank you. All right. All right, that's what I like about you, Mike.
I'm taking responsibility.
That's all right.
Got a question for you. The generator, it wasn't worth bringing up in the larger group. One of the things we do, we have a backup generator in our plant strictly for the IT department. So we have, yes, and then we have additional generators. We have